Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy. We're reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, pages 54 to 55. We left off with the caterpillar asking Alice who she was, and Alice saying that she really didn't know. She knew who she was, but she's changed so much that she really doesn't know. And the caterpillar, of course, what do you mean by that? He says, explain yourself. And the caterpillar is, even though he's talking languidly, right? I can't explain myself, she says, because I'm not myself, you see. Remember, this self is very important in what we're talking about. The concept of who you are, who people think you are. We're going to get into that throughout this whole chapter. And she's being confronted by the caterpillar to explain herself, S-E-L-F, and she doesn't know. And she says, I'm not myself, you see. And the caterpillar says, I don't see. And she says, I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly. Very politely, there's the narrator tell us again how she said what she's saying. She's trying to be polite, but she's very confused. I can't understand it myself to begin with. And being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing. The size of Alice and the concept of size, what is size, is important in this story. And they decide to discuss that. So she says, I've been many different sizes. And it's very confusing to be different sizes. Now, remember, in conversations and throughout the story, often Alice forgets who she's talking to. And in this case, she's talking to a caterpillar, who, if you know anything about caterpillars, they come in all shapes and sizes. And so the caterpillar tells her it isn't, which means it's not confusing. And she says, well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet. But when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will someday, you know, and then after that, into a butterfly. So she knows from her experience what happens to caterpillars. If you don't know what happens to caterpillars, then you lose some of the appreciation and meaning of what's going on between the caterpillar and Alice. And yourself, if you don't know things, it's hard to find out about who you are unless you have a basis of comparison, which is why to learn about yourself, you have to learn about all sorts of different things, not just caterpillars, but all sorts of different things in order to figure out who you really are. And she tells the caterpillar, I think you'll find it a little queer, won't you? Now, that word queer appears throughout this book. And in this day and age, it's taken on a whole different meaning. But I don't want you to be afraid of the word. Shouldn't be afraid of the word, because queer means strange. It's just strange. Remember, the English language takes on very, very different meanings throughout. As words change, as people use words differently, you're going to find out the word you thought meant this doesn't mean that anymore because somebody starts using it in a different way and it takes on that meaning. That's okay. In this story, we want to understand the word queer to mean strange. Nothing good, nothing bad, it's just strange. And she asks the caterpillar, you'll feel a little strange, won't you? And he says, not a bit. And why won't he feel strange? Because he's a caterpillar. Well, and then she says, well, perhaps your feelings may be different, said Alice, and all I know is it would feel very queer to me. You, said the caterpillar, contemptuously, with contempt. You? Who are you? There's that question again. It's not going to feel strange to you. Well, who are you? Which brought them back to the beginning of the conversation. So now Alice is feeling a little irritated. See the word irritated? At the caterpillars making such very short remarks. And remember, he's not doing dissertations. He's just saying remarks. So she drew herself up. She raises herself just like a caterpillar. And said very gravely, I think you ought to tell me who you are first. So you'll find out in this book, in this story, that Alice often challenges the person she's talking to. She gets frustrated, she gets put in a corner with logic, and then suddenly she's challenging the other person, like in this case, well, you tell me who you are first. And the caterpillar says, why? One word, why? By the way, I better mark that word. Why is one of the greatest words in the English language. There's a story by Herman Melville called Bartleby the Scrivener. I'm not going to write that down, but I want you to remember that. We'll talk about that some other time. But the word why is very interesting. So when you're confronted with something that you really don't want to do, or something that somebody's asking you, you don't know the answer to, it's a great way to say, why do you need to know that? Or why? Why? So Alice herself sees that as a puzzling question. See the word puzzling? And the caterpillar seemed to be a very unpleasant state of mind. She turned away. So she just walks away. I'm taking my football home. I'm taking my ball home. I'm not going to play anymore. Come back, said the caterpillar. I have something important to say. So does that mean that what he's been saying so far is unimportant? I don't think so. But he stops her and tells her to come back. So this sounded promising. So Alice, that sounds pretty cool. So she turns back and he tells her, keep your temper. Now, why does he tell her that? Well, she lost her temper. She turned around in a huff and started walking away when the caterpillar asked her why, after her question that you should tell me about who you are first. Now, temper, what is temper? Well, it could be, I put it down there for you to read. It's a person's state of mind in terms of there being anger or calm, the degree of hardness or elasticity. Those are a lot of big words to say anger. Anger. When you lose your temper, you become angry, right? So it's a state. It's not anger itself, your temper. I lost my temper. I got angry, right? So is that all? She says, swallowing down her anger. There it is. See it up here? Swallowing down her anger. She lost her temper. He says, keep your temper, like he's reading her mind. And basically says, she swallows down her anger as well as she could. Keep your temper, said the caterpillar. And Alice says, is that all? And he said, no. Now she thought as well as wait, as she had nothing else to do. And perhaps after it all, he'd tell her something worth hearing, something worth hearing. For some minutes, the caterpillar puffed away without speaking. Now this is, remember, time is passing. And I told you when the narrator tells us some minutes while it puffs its hookah, at last it unfolded its arms. How many arms does a caterpillar have? Don't answer that. He took the hookah out of his mouth and said, so you think you're changed, do you? So you think you are changed, do you? Now that's really hit a chord with Alice because she says, I'm afraid I am, sir. It's back to respect. I can't remember things I used to, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together. She says, I can't remember anything the way I used to. She's confused. She's very, very confused. But she's too general in her answer. So the caterpillar says, "What? You can't remember what things? What?" And she says, well, I tried to remember How Doth the Little Busy Bee, which is a poem, but it all came out different. Alice replied in a very melancholy voice. I tried to say, how doth the little busy bee, but it all came out different. Melancholy means you're pensive, you're sad, and it's for no obvious reason, but she has a lot of reasons to be sad. So the caterpillar says, repeat, you are old, Father William, said the caterpillar. Alice folded her hands and began. Began what? Well, she began to repeat a poem called You Are Old, Father William, because the caterpillar wants to test this theory that she can't remember things. So he tells her to repeat, You Are Old, Father William. And that's where we're going to stop with page 54, 55. This is Jimmy. We're analyzing Alice's adventures in Wonderland, advice from a caterpillar. And in the next couple of pages, we're going to hear what Alice says when she folds her hands. Now, one last note. When Alice folded her hands, what do you do when you fold your hands? Well, some people, when they fold their hands, they pray. But when she's going to recite, she folds her hands. In the old days, when you would recite something, you would put your hands in front of yourself and fold your hands, one on top of the other in front of you, like stomach level. And you start reciting. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Chapter 5. Thanks for listening. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com is my email. Readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com is my email. Send me an email. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for listening.